Barbara and Nathan had been friends since they were very young. They went to the same kindergarten, and then they were in the same class at school. The mother, who raised the boy alone, was not happy. The woman was afraid that the beautiful girl would break her son's heart. The girl openly played on the boy's nerves. For example, at the prom, she pointedly refused to dance with him, and at the end of the celebration she kissed him right in the hallway and walked with him until morning. Almost immediately after the prom, Nathan was going to go into the army. The boy's mother hoped very much that during his enlistment he would be able to forget the haughty girl. But contrary to her mother's expectations, Barbara regularly wrote letters to her son and 6 months later even went to visit him in his unit. 2 months later, tragedy struck. Nathan was brought home in a military vehicle. The car door opened, and the son struggled to get out, limping and shifting his knotty legs with difficulty. The mother rushed to meet him. The officer who escorted said that her son had saved a recruit in the exercise, but had been wounded by a fragmentation grenade. Now he's been discharged and taken back to his place of residence after treatment. The officer said something else, but the mother heard nothing. She watched in horror as her only son waddled toward the house. In the evening, Nathan painfully told his mother that he had become an invalid and that the doctors did not hope that he would ever be able to get better and walk normally. The young man practically cried, called himself worthless, and confessed that he did not want to live at all. The mother listened to her son, stroked his head like a baby, comforted him as best she could. Suddenly someone knocked on the door and they saw Barbara standing on the threshold. The girl rushed to Nathan, hugged him and began to tell what horror stories the neighbors had told her about him. And then Barbara herself saw the shaky gait and lack of coordination, and realized that the neighbors had told the truth. The girl hesitantly asked if Nathan would recover. The young man shook his head in the negative. He saw pity in the girl's eyes, which hurt him, and he asked her to leave. Barbara hesitated and did not want to leave. Suddenly this made Nathan angry. He grabbed the girl by the arms and pushed her to the door, yelling that he didn't want to see anyone. The next day he went to ask the girl for forgiveness. But he was too late. Barbara had already left for the city to go to university. Nathan took it hard when he was separated from his beloved. He began drinking from frustration. One day a neighbor, a war veteran, visited them. He snatched another bottle of beer from the guy's hands and poured the contents out the window without regret. The man scolded Nathan harshly and reminded him that people even without legs live and achieve their goals because they do not give up. And then the man promised to get Nathan a job as a gardener for well-to-do people. His niece was already working for them and was earning good money. Nathan agreed, especially since there was hope of meeting Barbara in the city. Working in a rich house was unusual at first, but Nathan liked that the people around him were very friendly. Especially caring was a young girl, Marilyn, who showed Nathan his room and told him about the routines. Later he learned that Marilyn was an orphan. The owner of the house took her from the street, where she begged, taught her a lot, and made her a manager. Marilyn was the only one who would sit down at the table with the owner's family. Although Nathan initially took care of the flowers and the garden, very soon he became the personal driver of the master's son. Stanley sometimes allowed himself to drive drunk, and this disturbed his father. Nathan was happy with his new job, and Stanley turned out to be not a bad guy. One day Nathan took his passenger to a party, but stayed waiting in the car and dozed off. He was awakened by loud voices. Right outside the car, a tipsy Stanley was arguing with two unfamiliar rich men. Behind him stood a confused young girl in a short dress. Stanley tried to break through to the car, but the men blocked his way. It was clear that a fight was about to break out. Nathan jumped out of the car and jumped on one of the attackers, pushing him away with his shoulder. Stanley was not confused and shoved the second. Together with the girl, they were in the car in a jiffy. Nathan was already sitting in the driver's seat when a shot rang out. A sharp pain pierced his chest and he was surprised to see a red stain on the spotless white of his shirt. He felt Stanley's hand clasp the wound, and then he lost consciousness. He woke up in the intensive care ward and stared in amazement at the wires enveloping him. A cumbersome machine was beeping nastily and a girl was dozing peacefully in a chair pulled up to the bed. The boy threw up his hands in an attempt to wipe his eyes and groaned at the sharp pain in his chest. The girl sitting in the chair woke up and jumped up. Nathan realized that it was Marilyn. He tried to send the girl home, but Marilyn shook her head and admitted that she would go crazy at home with anxiety. Nathan was surprised, but then slipped back into a life-saving sleep. Then there were 2 months in the best rehabilitation center, where Stanley's father placed him. Exercises on special machines, physical therapy, special gymnastics, and even running. All this helped Nathan to recover. But the most amazing thing was that thanks to high-class specialists, Nathan was able to practically get rid of the limp that he had gotten in the army. When Nathan was finally able to return to work, everyone in the house greeted him warmly. The young man went to his room, dropped his traveling bag, and then noticed a bouquet of wild flowers standing in a vase on the windowsill. A warm smile stretched the young man's lips. In the evening, the owner solemnly thanked Nathan for saving his son and offered him to become Stanley's personal guard. For a very good salary, of course. A few days later, Stanley and Nathan, in their beautiful suits, were standing at the door of a fancy banquet hall. Stanley's father had instructed him to congratulate his business partner on his wedding. He himself did not like to attend such events, and the duty of courtesy was performed by his son with his new bodyguard. Stanley hurried to the newlyweds standing by the table and handed his bouquet to the bride. Nathan followed him, and suddenly froze. His eyes met Barbara's painfully familiar eyes. He looked at the bridegroom and was dumbfounded. A stout and bald man of over 50 was looking at him. Nathan managed to say congratulations to the bride and immediately headed for the exit of the banquet hall. Barbara caught up with Nathan already at the stairs. She said she was very happy that he had fully recovered. Nathan, on the other hand, could not think of anything but a terrible resentment. Taking the young woman by the arms, he directly asked her why she had made such a strange choice. Lowering her head, the bride confessed that she was marrying for the welfare of her family. Her father's company was on the verge of bankruptcy and the groom promised to pay all her debts if she gave him her consent. Barbara asked if Nathan could understand her. The guy had no choice but to wish the girl happiness and leave. He didn't remember how he got home, how he threw himself on the bed in his little room. His first love, Barbara, had married a man twice her age because of his wallet. He was sitting with his arms around his head when the door opened quietly and warm and affectionate hands rested on his shoulders. Nathan lifted his face, his cheeks wet with tears, and saw Marilyn. In a whisper, the young woman urged him not to cry and not to despair. Nathan embraced Marilyn and pulled her to him. He suddenly realized that his place was here, next to this girl, who would love him both in sorrow and in joy, who would help him in the most difficult moment and would never betray him.